بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله حمد الشاكرين والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين اللهم صل وسلم وبارك على سيدنا محمد طب القلوب ودوائها ونور الأبصار وضيائها وعافية الأبدان وشفائها السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. Before starting, inshaAllah ta'ala, we will recite Al-Fatiha for the souls of the shuhada, of all the martyrs in Palestine, in Gaza, and throughout Lebanon, in Lebanon in the past few weeks, as well as the past year during this conflict, and of course during the entire conflict ever since the occupation of Palestine, formal occupation in 1948. Al-Fatiha. Now, while this conflict rages, recently we've had the events of the killing of Yahya Sinwar, who, if you remember, after Ismail Haniya was killed in Iran, Hamas elected Yahya Sinwar as the political and military leader. He was already the military leader of Hamas, but he was elected as the political leader as well. Defiant as he was, he died and was killed while fighting Israeli occupying forces within Gaza, his home of Gaza. And many of you may have observed the drone video when the drone enters the room in which he was fighting and resisting against the occupying forces at that time. Now, today we will be discussing some of the backdrop with regard to the assassination of, or the killing of Yahya Sinwar, and the ramifications and long-term implications with regard to his assassination. Now, like as Abu Ubaidah mentioned in his speech on October the 7th, and we know all of Tel Aviv and all of occupied Palestine, they observe and watch the speech of Abu Ubaidah, the spokesman of Hamas. What he said in that speech after 1 year of the events of October the 7th, was that this land, meaning the land of Palestine, produces martyrs the way it produces olives. And the plan of execution that is carried out by the occupying forces is to assassinate the leadership of any movement within the region, whether it be Hezbollah, Hamas, Islamic Jihad, or any other group. But what Abu Ubaidah, he states in his lecture, in his announcement after 1 year, is that by assassinating leaders, you think you will finish resistance movements, rebel groups, whatever you may choose to term them. That is a false notion, because many years ago they had assassinated many top level Hamas leaders, like the late Shaykh Ahmed Yassin in 2004, and many other leaders of Hamas. Of course, Yahya Sinwar and Ismail Haniya and Muhammad Daif, all of these are students of Shaykh Ahmed Yassin. So, with regard to Yahya Sinwar, first there was speculation with regard to his death. The Israeli occupying forces, the terrorist group known as IDF, they had actually had engagements with Yahya Sinwar on Wednesday, the Wednesday gun. Contrary to what Israeli propaganda would want us to believe, that Yahya Sinwar was hiding under tunnels or was hiding under protection within those tunnels. Contrary to that, it was Yahya Sinwar and his aides who engaged the IDF occupying forces within Gaza. So that goes against the narrative that is spewed upon mainstream media, that Hamas fighters, for the main part, are within tunnels only, are not engaging directly against the IDF, are just hiding. While we've had the leadership in this case, which is Yahya Sinwar, engaging with the occupying forces. Now, previously, Yahya Sinwar took part in many protests within the Gaza Strip. For instance, in 2021, on May the 24th, there was a ceasefire after 11 days of engagement between the Israeli occupying forces and the Hamas movement or the Palestinian resistance groups within that region. Yahya Sinwar was known to engage within the public arena, was approachable by the people. But the events of October the 7th led to 1 year of engagement between the IDF, the occupation forces, and the Palestinian people. Now, what occurred on Wednesday was that there was an engagement between the occupying forces and Yahya Sinwar and his aides. After that engagement, of course, the IDF, heavily equipped, has tanks, and they utilize the tanks to destroy the, parts of the apartment block in which they were firing from. And then the aides were killed, and then Yahya Sinwar continued engaging with the IDF occupying forces. After which, they were unsure whether Yahya Sinwar had died, and they sent in the drone, and many of you may have observed the drone video. When the drone enters the building, Yahya Sinwar is sitting down and throws a piece of debris at the camera of the drone. And then on Saturday, the Israeli military said, on Thursday, the military said that Sinwar had been positively identified after he was killed the day before. And then on Friday evening, Hamas has also confirmed the death of Yahya Sinwar. And Iran's mission to the United Nations, so the Iranian representative spoke of Yahya Sinwar as a martyr, Shaheed. And the statement which was posted on X stated, when Muslims look up to the martyr Sinwar, standing on the battlefield in combat attire and out in the open, not in a hideout facing the enemy, the spirit of resistance will be strengthened. Now, according to some sources, what the Mossad and Shin Bet, what the Israeli intelligence, what they wanted to do was to take the body of Yahya Sinwar, perhaps place it in a tunnel, and then report the death of Yahya Sinwar afterwards as having died in the tunnel. The Israeli government or the occupying forces are known for concocting false news. That happened in the beginning. If you remember, I take you back to the events of November last year with the Shifa hospital, claiming that there was Hamas tunnels under the Shifa hospital, which turned out to be untrue. There were no Hamas tunnels under the Shifa hospital. Yet Israeli intelligence, which is not so intelligent, concocted false stories which no one actually believes. Similarly to the false stories that children were purposefully targeted on October the 7th and killed, that babies were killed, the false news, or the false news of rapes. This was all false news, peddled by rubbish journalists like Piers Morgan. Piers Morgan in the UK peddles that narrative of October the 7th, and similarly other journalists. So, how it was being perceived, the death of Yahya Sinwar, what the Israeli media or the Zionist media is attempting to do is to say that the majority of Muslims and Arabs, and specifically Palestinians, are happy at the death of Yahya Sinwar. Is that true? The answer is it is not true. On the ground, if Yahya Sinwar was disliked by the Palestinian people and disliked by the people of Gaza, they would have given up Yahya Sinwar and his comrades many years ago. So, throughout the past 12 months of this engagement, this war on this enclave known as Gaza, Yahya Sinwar has been engaging in combat. 63-year-old has been engaging with IDF occupying forces. And within the Gaza Strip, the military pressure remained under the leadership of Yahya Sinwar and Muhammad Daif, despite the fact that the Israelis have been assaulting Gaza with airstrikes, bombarding them heavily throughout the past months. Now, Yahya Sinwar was seen as a high-profile target for the Israeli military, like Muhammad Daif, as well as Ismail Haniyeh, even though Ismail Haniyeh was in charge of the political wing. And what they claim is that Yahya Sinwar was one of the masterminds, along with Muhammad Daif, utilizing, of course, Muhammad Daif is in charge of the Qassam brigades, and Marwan Isa, who is the deputy to Muhammad Daif. And remember, Muhammad Daif, for many years they have been attempting to find Muhammad Daif. Why is he known as Daif? As a guest, because he does not stay in one place. He does not use technology. Because in the past, Mossad has intercepted leaders of resistance movements by placing explosives in phones. So in phone devices, explosives were placed in phones, and then utilizing turncoats, utilizing munafiqeen, hypocrites, they would give those phone devices to operatives, and then when the device would be exploded in the hands of the target, and many people were assassinated by these methods. So Muhammad Daif was a target of the Shin Bet and the Israeli occupying forces for many years, and they would bomb entire building blocks. So there was no scruples within the occupying forces echelons of power. There was no scruples in how they targeted the residents of Gaza. So what we are observing now with Benjamin Netanyahu, and the lack of scruples, the lack of morality, the lack of ethics in killing and targeting and maiming young children. As many people will tell you that in Egypt, for instance, when children from Gaza, they enter Egypt, many of the Palestinian young children have already been shot. Some of them may have limbs missing. Some of them, their limbs are damaged through bullets. So when a huge bullet enters the limb of a child, it damages them for life. And this is prior to October the 7th. Not only after October the 7th. So the lack of scruples in the engagement of the Israeli occupying forces is not something that was only observed post October the 7th. Many of them, of course, feel justified after October the 7th. Now, what happened in February earlier this year was that the Israeli occupying forces claimed that they had a video of Yahya Sinwar leaving a tunnel complex with his wife and children and brother Ibrahim. And they claim that that video was taken just days after October the 7th attack. That was the claim. At that time, the Israeli spokesperson, Daniel Hagari, claimed that the Israeli military had taken many of the family members of Yahya Sinwar as prisoners. Now, the Israeli occupying forces are known for torture. They actually torture people, they rape people, this is well known. And the events of October the 7th, if they lead us to conclude anything, one of the main things that they lead us to conclude is that governments act without, as I said, scruples, but without anyone to stop them. That the international rules-based order that is claimed to exist does not actually exist. The mirage has finished. There is no international rules-based order. Governments act with oppression, governments act with tyranny at will, and no one can stop them. Benjamin Netanyahu has clearly demonstrated that. So many prisoners, Palestinian prisoners, prior to October the 7th and post October the 7th, thousands of prisoners have been tortured and killed in Israeli prisons. So, and that has been documented by human rights agencies, including the United Nations. So, the ICC, the International Criminal Court, also had Yahya Sinwar and Ismail Haniya, meaning they were being sought by the ICC. Of course, the ICC and the ICJ have demonstrated that they are actually defunct in carrying out any action, in terms of that Benjamin Netanyahu is also a criminal, attends the UN without any incrimination, without any arrest. Interpol does not arrest Benjamin Netanyahu when he attends the UN or New York City in the United States of America, even though there are warrants out for the arrest of war criminals who have carried out war crimes according to the ICC and the ICJ. But now that Yahya Sinwar has been killed in battle, Ismail Haniya has been killed in Iran, and that was a violation of the integrity of Iran, of Iran's autonomy. That was a violation of, as a nation state within the international community, that was a violation of Iran's autonomy, Iran's security. And by international standards, it's a criminal case, how he was assassinated, Ismail Haniya. All of them have been killed by Israeli military. Now, Israeli military, or the occupying forces, also claim that they have killed Muhammad Deif, even though this has not been confirmed by Hamas. Nevertheless, Benjamin Netanyahu and Yoav Gallant, who is the defense minister, they are also on the ICC charge sheet. They are also criminals according to the ICC charge sheet. But there is a distinction between these occupying forces and those being occupied. Now, anyone who knows anything about Yahya Sinwar will know that his kunya is Abu Ibrahim. He was born in 9. So these people were not born in free societies, they were born under occupation. So the mindset of people born under occupation is always different to your mindset. He was born in an occupation, under occupation in 1962 in Khan Yunis. So the very same region of Gaza, but remember his family was displaced by Zionist Jewish gangs, by what is known as the Jewish state, in the Nakba in 1948. So in 1948, Jewish Zionist gangs, they displaced many of the Palestinians from their homes, the Jewish Zionist gangs. And his family was also displaced from the area known as Asqalan. As they say, Ashkalan. It's Asqalan. Always Arabize the words. We as Muslims Arabize all the words as much as possible. So his family were from the village known as Majdal, and this village was razed to the ground. So when they razed Asqalan or Majdal, when they razed it all down, they built the town known as Ashkalan. These are things P.S. Morgan, the white imperialist, will not tell you. He will not mention this. He believes that the town of Ashkelon, for instance, has every right to exist the way it does in terms of the illegal settlements. Ashkelon is an illegal settlement. Who gave them the right to displace the people, burn down the villages, destroy the towns, and then build these mega cities or modern towns and displace the people, causing the events of October the 7th in the long run? So in 1982, he was arrested for the first time by the Israeli occupying forces for what they refer to as Islamic activities. Now, here you have to remember Shaykh Ahmad Yasin started a charitable organization in the late 1960s that lasted into the late 1980s, in 1987. And then later those charitable organizations became the movement known as Hamas, which then became outlawed. Hamas claims to be responsible for the first intifada, the uprising. The word intifada in reference to shaking down tyranny, unlocking the shackles of tyranny. So Yahya Sinwar, like Ismail Haniyeh, like many of those of his age group, they were under the tutelage of Shaykh Ahmad Yasin, who, by the way, was associated with the ulama of Damascus, the likes of Shaykh Ahmad Guftaro and other ulama of Damascus. There was a link between Shaykh Ahmad Yasin and ulama of Damascus. So in 1985 he was arrested again. And it was in 1985 where he became close to Shaykh Ahmad Yasin in prison. And at the age of 25, he established Hamas's internal security organization, Al-Majd, at the age of 25. And this is where he earned himself a reputation. How he earned a reputation was with regard to dealing with Palestinians who collaborated with the Israeli occupying forces. In 1988, so at that time he was 26 years old, he was arrested again and sentenced to 4 life sentences. So these are some of the heavy sentencing that occurs within occupied Palestine. So what happened at that time, he was charged with plotting the murder of 2 Israeli soldiers and killing 12 Palestinians. At that point, he spent 22 years in prison. 22 years in prison. And while in prison, they say he was very disciplined. At that point, he learned how to speak and read Hebrew fluently in prison. He was released in 2011. So after 22 years in prison, he comes out in 2011. And now taking you back to 2011 is during a prisoner swap for Israeli soldier Gilad Shalit with more than 1,000 other Palestinians. So for one Israeli soldier, they freed 1,000 Palestinians. That is the value given to a Jewish life over a Palestinian life. That is how the West, some of the West, like the United States and Germany, would value the life of one Jewish person over the life of a Palestinian. That one Jewish life in exchange for 1,000 Palestinians. And when those 1,000 Palestinians were actually released, he was deemed as one of the most prominent of those leaders, of those people who had been released. He has a younger brother known as Muhammad Sinwar, who is also an armed commander with Hamas. And some suspect he helped the cross-border raid in which Shalit was captured. There was a cross-border raid. Now these raids happen for a reason. They happen due to the nature of occupation. They happen due to the nature of a concentration camp. When I wrote my book, Intellectual Intifada, way before the events of October the 7th, the dedication was based upon our children in the largest concentration camps on earth. It's not an open air prison, it's a concentration camp. What is occurring now, the general's plan, which we will go into shortly, is an attempt to genocide. Straight after the events of October the 7th, I mentioned that there will be an attempt to genocide and to push the Palestinians out of Gaza and Palestine. Now, in 2013, he was elected remember Hamas was elected by the Palestinian people in the elections that occurred under the Bush administration, the younger Bush Jr. And Condoleezza Rice at the time said they were not expecting that result, that both Palestinians in the West Bank and in the Gaza voted in a Hamas administration through democratic elections. But in 2013, he was elected again as a member of Hamas's Politburo in Gaza. And in 2017, he became the movement's leader. So, what actually occurred in 2018, and this should be cited by people, is that Yahya Sinwar signaled in 2018 to Israel that Hamas's tactics were moving towards non-armed resistance. It was moving towards non-armed resistance. And he also said another war with Israel is definitely not in our interest. But by 2022, that had changed. Why? Because Israel elected its most right wing. Now remember, they use the term right wing, but there is no right to left wing in occupied Palestine, what is known as Israel. It's all right wing, and there's far right and middle right and only right. There is no left. Zionism is equal to Nazism. It's like a Nazi occupation. So by 2022, what happened is Israel, or the occupying forces, or the occupying settler colonial entity known as Israel, voted in its most right-wing government. A government with authorities making overtures at Al-Aqsa Mosque and signaling an Israeli normalization. They use the word normalization. I have another word for it, which I will not mention. There is another name for it, with Saudi Arabia. And this was a game changer. Now, what they refer to as Abrahamic Accords, remember, I would like to mention here that Benjamin Netanyahu and Gallant are not from the progeny of Abraham. You are not Semitic. Go and have a DNA test done. It's quite obvious. The Ashkenazis are not Semitic. You are not Middle Eastern. You are not from the progeny of Ibrahim. That's a fact, Ashkenazis. And Benjamin Netanyahu is not from that region. His ancestors are not from that region. You can quote the Torah as much as you want, but the Jews or the Bani Israel, the children of Israel in the Torah, are not your ancestors. You are not Semitic. You are Ashkenazi. Nevertheless, the claim to occupying the land and the land belonging to you is a false claim. It has no biblical roots. It has no biblical roots. It has no basis in the Torah. And you have no genetical claim to the land also. Even if you had a genetical claim, then of course the Maori, the Aborigines, the native Indians, all of these could claim the land that the Anglo-European peoples occupy today. That is a different issue. But what some people like Hugh Lovat, a senior policy fellow at the European Council on Foreign Relations, what he is quoted to have said is that Sinwar is a pragmatist shifting between political engagement and armed violence according to circumstances. That is what he stated. On December 14th in 2022, Sinwar and other Hamas leaders told a large crowd in Gaza that they predicted an open confrontation after Israel elected the most right-wing government in history. And then Sinwar's threats were repeated in early 2023. Now, during his reign as leader of Hamas, he focused on building ties in the region. That is well known. But some have said that the real mastermind behind October the 7th was actually Muhammad Daif. Now, Yahya Sinwar was engaging with the IDF, and also the IDF did not have any intelligence that Yahya Sinwar was in that location in Khan Yunis, in Rafah, when he was fighting the IDF soldiers. They did not have any intelligence. So it was solely from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala as to what happened. Meaning there was no intelligence with regard to the location of Yahya Sinwar. And remember also, it was Yahya Sinwar who decided to engage with the IDF. The Hamas aides who were with him, they engaged with the IDF. It was not the IDF who witnessed them and engaged with them. Now, Inshallah ta'ala, we will open up for some questions and answers also on the topic before moving on to the general's plan and a few other issues. Currently, as we speak, the Jabaliya district, so in North Gaza, to do with the general's plan as what is occurring now in North Gaza, the Jabaliya district, all communication has been cut. There is an exercise to genocide currently in North Gaza as we speak. Inshallah, we will take some of your engagement on the current subject. Someone asks, the person says that he is a Shia, and he says, when the Shia express our will for unity to our Sunni brothers, they say you simply doing taqiyya. What is the way we can respond to be accepted? Remember, the Shia, as I mentioned, firstly, the cursing of the Sahaba Ali Ridwan is what leads to discord. That the Shia must stop cursing the companions of the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And the narrative of disunity between the Ahlul Bayt and the Sahaba, the Sunnis do not accept that. The Sunnis do not believe in the story, the negative version of the events of Fadak, or the claim that the door of Ali radiallahu anh was booted in by the Sahaba Ali Ridwan, and these type of things. So you disengage from such claims which bring about the discord. Someone asks, Assalamu alaikum ya Shaykh, when will the Qadiani debate happen, where and when? Again, the Qadianis have not emailed me again. I await their response. Ibn Haydar says, Salam Shaykh, I love your work and all that you do. Please could I get a shout out? Someone asks a question, how do we understand and deal with the guilt of not being able to do much outside of donation and awareness for the Palestinians? Do not underestimate donations. Recently, there was one brother from Birmingham, and there's a few that have funded entire blocks, entire building blocks for Palestinian refugees to live in. The rent for an entire family will cost you £1,000 a year to give them good quality accommodation. £1,000 a year. Do not underestimate these things. There are refugees who are arriving, and there are Muslims from the UK and the West and other countries who are funding their education, funding their so they can finish their degrees in medicine. Do not underestimate your donations. Go out your way and fund entire families to live respectable lives. So do not underestimate also the awareness that we create. This awareness that we create, it can inspire someone to take care of an entire orphanage of young children who will be raised correctly and will be saved from human traffickers. There are so many Palestinian children now in Egypt as refugees that we have a responsibility to take care of those children. So do not underestimate charity and creating awareness. Sheikh, what is the role of Egypt during our time? If you ask in terms of Akhir Zaman and Ashratu Sa'a, Egypt will be facing sanctions according to the hadith in the Sahih of Imam Muslim, as well as water shortages. And this is a warning for the Egyptian government that if you do not demonstrate benevolence to the Palestinians and people do not stop taking bribery from the people who are taking refuge in Egypt, as well as bribery from those charity workers who bring in the aid, then a punishment awaits Egypt also. That is sunanullahi fil kawn, the way of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the universe. Someone asks, a few weeks ago you said that Israel will be conquered before the Euphrates war. But in previous lectures you mentioned they shall be destroyed after the Euphrates war. So how come you have changed your mind? Well, there is nothing explicitly mentioned with regard to a Jewish occupation and colonization during the time of Al-Mahdi. There is nothing explicit. What is mentioned is that the black banners shall conquer Jerusalem. So it's speculation whether when the black banners conquer Jerusalem, will they conquer the city of Jerusalem from the Jewish colonizers, or will they take it from Muslims? That is speculation. But reading into the subject, especially after writing my book, Navigating the End of Time, it becomes quite clear that the current Israeli occupation will be dismantled before the Euphrates goal. Someone states Nu'aym bin Hammad's book Kitabul Fitan mentions the ruler of the black banners will be a man named Shu'ayb bin Salih, and he will conquer Jerusalem. Can you tell us more about this individual? Yes, this is also mentioned in the Sunan of Ibn Majah, that the men of Khurasan, when they appear, they shall be led by Shu'ayb bin Salih, and he will conquer Jerusalem for Al-Imam al-Mahdi. That is the details that are mentioned in the hadith. He will lead the black banners for Al-Imam al-Mahdi. Someone asks, what is the response to people who say that we recognize there is a creator but we just do not know who it is? The answer is that the creator has responded to you, or we would say that the creator has communicated with you in his speech, which is Al-Quranul Kareem. Someone asks, Sheikh, does Khurasan include Pakistan? The answer is no. It's part of Afghanistan and it's parts of Iran. Someone asks the question, no one is speaking for the siege in North Gaza, which has been over 2 weeks. What can we do practically? Raise it Meaning, what can we do? Practically protest, demand aid to be sent, food and aid and medicine, water. The answer is that we continue what we can do within our ability. And remember, as I said, do not underestimate the aid that you may send. So the second segment, what I wanted to cover was with regard to the general's plan. What is the general's plan? Remember, there is something that is referred to as the Israeli general's plan for northern Gaza. And what this refers to is a demand from the Israelis to move the Palestinians that are residing in areas like Beit Hanun, Beit Lahia, Jabalia refugee camp, and Jabalia town. Remember, Jabalia refugee camp is a target of the Israeli occupation forces because this refugee camp was the starting point, the inception point of the Intifada in 1987. So the burning of civilians that we are observing in the last few weeks, burning of human beings at the hands of the Israeli occupation forces, all of this we are observing because they are being purposefully targeted. And what is the objective? The stated objective of this operation is to destroy regrouped Palestinian resistance forces in the north. That is what they claim. They're claiming they are targeting resistance groups. But what is actually going on is what is referred to as the general's plan. It's referred to as the general's plan. What is the general's plan? The general's plan is ethnically cleansing of North Gaza. Why? As a form of collective punishment for all of the people of Gaza. Ethnically cleansing them. Now, why is this even referred to as the general's plan? The reason is that the general mentioned here is Giora Island. That is, I think, how his name is pronounced. Island, Eiland. And this general is, by the way, is retired. He's a retired general. Many of them, these are Nazis. You have to remember this. They are actually Nazis, Jewish Nazis. It may sound like an oxymoron to many people, but that is what Zionism is, in essence. It's Jewish Nazism. The entity is referred to as the Jewish state, the only country in the entire world which is known as the Jewish state. But in reality, it's Jewish Nazism. That is ruled by the Talmud, not the Torah. The Talmud has clear commands of killing civilians. It's a book that insults Jesus, which Christians will never tell you. Christian Zionists will never mention that. You go to Birmingham city centre, you will see Christian Zionists that support the Zionist occupation, evangelicals, Protestant Christians. But what those Protestant Christians, evangelicals will not tell you is that the Talmud and Zionism actually insults Jesus. They insult Jesus and they insult the mother of Jesus. So this general, the plan that he put forward was for the expulsion of Palestinians from the area. How? By forcing starvation. Forcing starvation. So currently in North Gaza, they are not permitting aid. Aid is not entering. And whoever decides to remain will be deemed a legitimate military target. So initially, in North Gaza, there was 1.1 million Palestinians. 1.1 million. Currently, as we speak, there are 400,000. As they attempt to expel the people from North Gaza, anyone who decides to remain, they will be targeted as legitimate targets. And what the Knesset, remember the Israeli illegal parliament is known as the Knesset. This is such a Knesset that when the idiot Piers Morgan asks the question or mentions the two-state solution, someone should ask him that why then is the Knesset voting for no two-state solution, no Palestinian state? If Israel actually wanted peace, why is the Knesset, by almost unanimous agreement, voting for a no two-state solution, no Palestinian state? It's a Nazi state in action. It's a Nazi entity. So the Knesset Foreign Affairs Defense Committee at that time, this former general, he said, what matters to Sinwar, so it relates to Yahya Sinwar, is land and dignity. And with this maneuver, you take away both land and dignity. That is what the Jewish state is about. Taking away land and dignity from the Arabs, from the Palestinians. Taking away land and dignity. And that is the aims and objectives of the general's plans. A week after he states this, Benjamin Netanyahu, he informed members of the same committee that he was considering implementing the proposal. And he said this to save face in front of the Israeli public, because given that a year into the war, he had not still achieved his objectives. But does Israel, or what is referred to as Israel, or the Jewish occupation, does it have the political space to carry out this proposal? Now, of course, what they want to do is separate the Gaza Strip. How? Separate Gaza city from the Strip. Why? Because Gaza city is one of the focal points. It connects the whole region. For instance, Shifa Hospital is located in central Gaza. And many non-profit organizations and businesses are part of what we were referred to as middle class Gazans or people of Gaza are based there. And this would have, if Gaza city is separated from North Gaza. They also see this region of North Gaza as very important because, like I said, it contains the Jabalia refugee camp. And as I mentioned, it is also the place where the Intifada started. Now, there is also something known as the port of Ashkelon, Asqalan as we say. They have a port which is just 6 miles away from Gaza's border. So you have a port. Now if Iran was targeting Iran, what would be a good target for Iran would be this port, as well as, of course, the electrical, the illegal entity has 5 electrical places that supply electricity to the whole of what is referred to as Israel. Never referred to it as Israel, referred to it as occupied Palestine, the whole region. 5 electrical power supplies. Those are vulnerabilities of the state, of the illegal entity. Likewise, the gas and the water. If that is taken out by ballistic missiles, Iranian ballistic missiles, the entire entity is failed. But 6 miles from Gaza's border, you have, of course, a significant portion of what is referred to as Israel, what is the Ashkelon, Ashdod area. So, control of North Gaza and the coast is what they would want to do. Why? For illegal appropriation of the Gaza marine gas field. There is gas in the region. They would want illegal appropriation. That gas that is found in the Gaza, it belongs to Palestine, but the illegal entity would want to take advantage of that gas. Now remember, since November of last year, so since the events of October the 7th, since November of last year, what Israeli occupying forces did was what became known as the Netzarim corridor, which is a strip of land extending from Israel's official borders to the Mediterranean Sea. So you have a strip of land known as Netzarim corridor. They want to make from Israel's official borders to the Mediterranean Sea that cuts off North Gaza from its central and southern parts. That is the long-term goal. And this, what they refer to as the corridor, will only be 2.5 miles. 2.5 miles. You can walk from Sparkbrook to Alam Rock and cover a distance of 2.5 miles. But what it will do is give them logistical support and advantage. So they designate this as a military zone, and it will prevent Palestinians from moving back and forth between north and south. So it's already a concentration camp. They would want to increase this level of occupation. Now, the current war in North Gaza and this general's plan is to take away, to remove the population en masse. So the general's plan is to clear North Gaza of all its inhabitants. When they clear all of the inhabitants, the Israeli occupying forces will then announce it as a closed military zone and prevent Palestinians from accessing their homes and lands. Then what they would want to do is you have the South Rafah crossing and confine the Palestinians to a smaller region, forcing many of them to migrate from Palestine. That is the long-term plan of what is referred to as the general's plan. But will they be able to do that? The answer is no. Why? Insha'Allah ta'ala, they will not be able to do so. We ask Allah not to give them success in doing this, because firstly, it would require constraints and resources. So the the elections in America are occurring in November. They have from now till the elections in November, and then whoever comes into government in November, they will take office in January. So they have a timeline to carry out the general's plan. How long can the Israeli occupying forces keep their positions in North Gaza while fighting Hezbollah and having a showdown with Iran? Because Benjamin Netanyahu, in all his arrogance, has the arrogance that he has demonstrated, has declared that he will attack Iran. If he attacks Iran, and most likely he will attack Iran, it will lead to a conflagration, an escalation in the region, and Iran could potentially target very vulnerable locations of what is known as Israel. So that is with regard to the current events that are occurring with the general's plan. Inshallah, after taking a few more questions, I have something to mention with regard to Benjamin Netanyahu, Bibi, and his relationship with the rabbi. If you remember, he had a rabbi, and this is why Bibi's motives are messianic. His motives are messianic in nature. And when you have messianic motives, you see red, and you have the devil guiding you. So he has the devil, a rabbi, who they refer to as a Rebbe. He was guiding him in his actions that he is carrying out. Inshallah ta'ala, we will open up Someone asks the question, Shaykh, how many events remain before Al-Mahdi? As-Sufyani, Ahadith Mawdu, is Khilafah before after emergence of Mahdi? Very quick to your answers to your questions. There are many events left before Al-Mahdi. There is allusion to Sufyani in authentic hadith, even though not by name, like in the Sahih of Imam Bukhari. Is Khilafah before after emergence of Al-Mahdi? You can say that it's fard for the Muslims to re-establish the Khilafah collectively, meaning it's a fard on our shoulders to attempt to re-establish the Khilafah, and whether that is successful before the Mahdi, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows best, but the obligation remains. A blind mystic named Baba Vanga said that Muslims will conquer Rome in the year 2043 and establish a caliphate in Rome. What are your thoughts on her predicting caliphate in Rome in 2043? Stay away from such Babas. Stick to the Quran and Sunnah. The Sunnah does tell us that Al-Imam al-Mahdi will conquer Rome, but remember, the capital of the Mahdi will be Jerusalem, not Rome, even though he will conquer Rome. Someone asks, what will the Sufyani do when he appears, and does he have any relation to Israel at the time, or will he be allied with Israel and the West? There is no mention of Israel at that time. It will be finished by then. Israel will be finished by the time of the Sufyani. Someone asks, Shaykh, do you know of the black nobility? The answer is yes. Someone asks, how influential was Yahya Sinwar? Will his passing cause a decline in morale for resistance fighters? Morale. The answer is no, it will not. It will actually increase the morale, because it's not a leader-based resistance, this particular resistance of the Palestinian people. The nature of resistance is that the flag bearers change. And it's beyond one person, it's beyond Yahya Sinwar. It transcends individuals. Someone asks, Sheikh, will Dajjal have a physical, literal one eye? The answer is no. No one says that. He will have two eyes. When the hadith states he will be one-eyed, it means one eye will actually blind. He will be blind in one eye. Someone asks, Sheikh, will World War III happen if USA wage war on Iran? And someone else says, Sheikh, can you talk about the Greater Israel Plan? Yes, the Greater Israel Plan is no hidden secret. The Greater Israel Plan is actually something which is open and well known. How is it well known? It is well known that the Zionists intend to take Al-Madinah Al-Munawwarah, because remember, Al-Madinah Al-Munawwarah had settlement where the Banu Qaynuqa', the Banu Nadir, and the Banu Qurayza. And then these tribes were actually expelled from Al-Madinah Al-Munawwarah. They were expelled by the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Because of these early settlements, many of the Zionists would want to conquer that region, to occupy that region, and make it a part of what they refer to as Greater Israel. Similarly, many of them want parts of Egypt and they want parts of Syria and Iraq. That is the long-term objective. Someone asks, is the 8th decade curse mentioned anywhere in the Quran and Hadith? The answer is no. That's from the Torah. Someone asks, does the resistance target civilians? The answer is no. Resistance movements do not target civilians. So there is also a question here. Someone asks, real question, is Bibi the Dajjal? Some said Ariel Sharon was the Dajjal. And these are minor Dajjals before the actual Dajjal. Ariel Sharon attempted to enter Masjid al-Aqsa during the second Intifada. So the second Intifada was between the year 2000 and year 2005. Later, Ariel Sharon, he died, he went into a coma, and then he died a disgraceful death. Someone asks, the first followers of a Dajjal will be Iranians. Is this true? The questioner doesn't mention that they will be Jews of Isfahan. Jews of Isfahan, 70,000 of them. I believe that after the destruction of the current occupation, when the entity is dismantled, many of the Jews will relocate to Isfahan, and they will be the first followers of a Dajjal. What is Pakistan's plan with Imran Khan in prison? Jemaima Khan and others have reported Imran Khan is now in total darkness and no contact with family or lawyer, etc. Well, he's a political prisoner in Pakistan, and we will see what the outcome will be. Of course, it could be a plot to have him killed eventually in prison. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows best. But keep your eyes open for Kashmir. Keep your eyes open with regard to events in Kashmir. Because whatever occurs in Palestine, Modi and his government, they model themselves, because there was an alliance between European nations, Israel and India, trade alliance. And that after that trade alliance, it was Modi modeled himself upon the policies of Israel. So there could be future policies within occupied Kashmir and the Pakistan administered Kashmir that we should watch out for. Someone asks, Ya Shaykh, what will be the situation if Gulf monarchies allowed the US and Israel to attack Iran, it would not be shocking. Because remember, those Gulf monarchies are the same that allowed, who gave bases to the US under the fatwa of Abdul Aziz bin Baz. The United States of America was given bases in the Arabian Peninsula to attack Iraq when Saddam Hussein decided to invade Kuwait. So do not be surprised if these Gulf nations not only permit an attack on Iraq, but also facilitate it. It would not shock anyone. Someone says, can you as an alim have more lectures about eschatology, as Muslims today are unaware? Why is the world manifesting all of this? There are many lectures of mine on the subject of eschatology. You'll find them on my channel and elsewhere, as well as my book, Navigating the End of Time. Someone asks the question, Sheikh, are average Israelis civilians or combatants? Remember, we do not recognize Israel as a state within Palestine. It should be relocated to Germany or the United States of America. And Israelis who are referred to as Israeli citizens, most of them undertake military training, and they are reserves for the IDF. Many of the settlers carry guns and kill Palestinians and carry out acts of violence against Palestinians. Okay, now I will move on to something with regard to the meeting between Benjamin Netanyahu and his Rebbe. He writes, now Benjamin Netanyahu, I quote him, he writes, he says, I became Israel's ambassador to the United Nations in 1984. This Bibi has an autobiography worth reading. Get the free copy, a pirated copy, don't pay for the dog's work. But you learn the psyche of a psychopath by reading his autobiography. He states, shortly afterwards, I had a visitor in my office in New York. I was told that there was a young gentleman who wanted to see me. He said he knew me. So remember, Bibi was a part of a cult. He says he came in and there was this strapping chassid with a beard and payas, meaning side locks, the Jewish locks. Remember, Dajjal will have these locks as well. I said to him, do I know you? He said, Bibi, you don't know me? It's Shamaria. So he says, Shamaria was a member of Shomer Hatzer. He had been a very fine soldier of mine. I was his commander, as you can understand. I hadn't seen him in a few years. Then he said, well, you see, I've become a Lubavitcher and the Rebbe wants to see you. So the Rebbe was a cult leader in New York. Remember, the headquarters of Jewish Zionism, Jewish Masonry, Jewish Cabal, all of that is in New York. The capital of all of this, what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions, that they follow sihr, claiming that the sihr, the magic, was from the kingdom of Sulaiman alayhi salam. Many of you must have heard of the tunnels being dug under New York streets. All of these practices, Kabbalah, Masonry, all of this, their headquarters is New York. In fact, go and check Lucis Trust. Go and research Lucis Trust. You go and check Lucis Trust. It's the only religious organization found in the UN building today, the Lucis Trust. Who do the Lucis Trust worship? They worship Shaitan, Lucifer. The Lucis Trust. They worship the fallen angel. They refer to him as a fallen angel, Lucifer. So he said, the Rebbe wants to see me. Okay, let's go see him. He said, it's not so simple. This was the eve of Simchat Torah. We'll go tonight. He said, tomorrow night. I said 7, 8 o'clock. No, he said, at 12 o'clock, I will pick you up midnight. All right. He picked me up and we came to that famous address, 770 Parkway, a replica of a house that we have near Ben Gurion Airport. This was said smilingly, tongue in cheek. The reference is to building the Kfar Chabad near Tel Aviv, which Chabad in Israel have built as a miniature replica of the world headquarters building in Brooklyn. Can you believe this? In Tel Aviv, they have a miniature replica of the world headquarters building in Brooklyn, New York. Is it with little wonder that Israel is supported now by the United States of America? It's the same bankers, the same cabal, the same people, the same oligarchy that controls America, occupies Palestine. Right next to that building was a hall about the size of this room that we are in now, I think smaller. How many people are in here? 1,000 people. You see the difference between you and Chabad is that they perform miracles. He claims they perform miracles. They had 4,000 people in a place like this. How did they accomplish this miracle? By having hills and valleys of Chassidim. It was not clear what the structure was. He says, in this human sea, I was somehow taken by Shamaria and brought to a stage. The stage was tiny, about the size of my outstretched arms. And there was a small book on the podium facing the wall. Shamaria says, wait here. Here? He says, sit down on the stage. Suddenly a door opened. You could not see anyone. The Rebbe was of enormous stature, but not of great height. So the Rebbe comes out. You saw the sea parting like the Red Sea. The Rebbe came up and went to the book and he started to read with his back to the crowd. At that point, Shamaria said to me, now. I said, now what? He said, go to the Rebbe now. I said, Shamaria, he's reading the Torah. He said, go to the Rebbe now. The soldier giving his command orders, life has its reversals. I thought, well, this is not Rome, but when in Lubavitch land, do as. I came to the Rebbe, I tried to get his attention, and I was not successful. I tapped him on the shoulder, and he looked like this to the side. I said in English, Rebbe, I came to see you. And he said, just to see, not to talk. Now, he spoke to the Rebbe. He says, we started talking. He spoke Hebrew, perfect Hebrew, with a certain Ashkenazi accent, but perfect Hebrew. Remember, these Ashkenazi are not Semitic. He says, and we spoke for 5 minutes, 10 minutes, and the Chassidim were getting very restless. 15 minutes, 20 minutes, and there was a buzz, a hum that began to rise. 30 minutes, 35 minutes. I thought my physical safety is now in jeopardy. After 40 minutes, he stopped. He said what he wanted to say. What did this Rebbe tell him? Firstly, there is a recording of the meeting online. This Rebbe, this cult leader, had told Benjamin Netanyahu that he will be the prime minister, the last prime minister of Israel. And when he is prime minister, he will usher in the age of the Jewish Messiah, the false Jewish Messiah, the Mashiach. They call him the Mashiach. We call him the Masih, the disfigured one. Masih, ad-Dajjal. So Netanyahu is told by this Rebbe that he will usher in the Mashiach, the false Messiah. And that is the project of Netanyahu. Now, generally speaking, what they mention is that Benjamin is sustaining this war in order to stay in power, to avoid criminal cases against him. Allah knows best whether those criminal proceedings will actually occur when he loses power eventually. He can lose power anytime. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala takes power from people whenever he wills. We could wake up tomorrow and Benjamin is gone. That can happen. But will the state, the criminal Nazi entity, proceed with criminal charges against him? We will wait and see. But he believes he will usher in the time of the Messiah. This is what he actually believes. So you have a psychopath running a colonial entity, a Nazi colonial entity, who believes he will usher in the time of the Mashiach. And most of these, even these liberal Jews, believe in the Mashiach. They believe in ushering in an apocalyptic Messiah. And the criminal acts that they do now, the war, they believe, and the Christians, the Zionist Christians in the Bible Belt, they also believe that they will usher in the age of the Messiah. They believe it's Jesus. While the Jews believe it's their Messiah, not Jesus. They curse Jesus. And the Muslims, we say it's the false Messiah. It's a Dajjal that you are bringing in, that you are ushering in, or attempting to bring in. But Dajjal will not appear anytime soon. Not yet. There are many events yet to transpire. And by that time, the Israeli occupation forces will be finished. They will relocate. Some of them will relocate to Isfahan. And the hadith states that there shall be an anger. There will be an anger, ghadbah, that will bring a Dajjal out. What that ghadbah is not specified in the hadith, but I believe it's the end of this occupying force. They take their orders from New York and they carry out the occupation in Palestine. And Bibi is on record in his statement after Sinwar died. He said this is a battle between light and dark forces, good versus evil. He deems himself as good and the Palestinian children as evil. Armed to the teeth, the Israeli military is armed to the teeth. They are fighting civilians. They are fighting people who are making, those who are making weapons, they are making those weapons at home. Not people who are armed to the teeth. So that is the backdrop of the war that we are witnessing. Inshallah, we will open up for more questions and answers. I will be taking some of your questions before concluding, inshallah ta'ala. Someone asks, Sheikh Ahmed Yassin, the former Hamas leader, said Israel will be destroyed in the year 2027. He mentions two 40-year cycles, beginning with partition, then the first beginning with partition, the UN partition, then the first Intifada in 1947 and 1987. That is a comment here that someone has mentioned. Someone asks, what are your thoughts on hijrah? I would like to ask, where do you want to do hijrah to? To Dubai? There are people calling for hijrah to Dubai, to the UAE. Where? Hijrah to where? To Egypt? Today what we face is globalization. Globally, the governments have everyone under occupation through the banking system and through heavy taxation, through constitutions that have secular law. If you want to do true hijrah, there are only a very few places to go to. But at what cost? So the first thing we need to do hijrah from is our sins and disobeying Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But remember one thing, لا هجرة بعد الفتح. Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam said, لا هجرة بعد الفتح. It was referring to the hijrah from Mecca to Al-Madinah because Mecca became Darul Islam. The concept of al-hijrah, inshallah, I will cover at another time, that during the movement of Muhammad bin Abdul Wahhab, he commanded his followers to do hijrah to Najd from Mecca al-Mukarramah because they deemed everywhere else Darul Kufr except Najd. Someone says, with regard to making a lesson on the order of the Ashratu Sa'a, the answer is, that is already done. If you check my channel, I have already done that, and I have written an entire book, Navigating the End of Time. Inshallah ta'ala, we will conclude today's live session. And I pray to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that He facilitate victory, inshaAllah ta'ala, ajilan, and save us from the evils of Ahlul Shar, the likes of Benjamin Netanyahu and others. أقول قولي هذا واستغفر الله لي ولكم وأتوب إليه.